Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Taco Society Presents. I'm here with Phil Perrone.
Tony,
How you doing?
It's good to see you.
It's been a while. We didn't have a show last month.
Yep, that's good. Halloween just took up so much time, and there was a lot of events.
It did, and I'll be honest with you, I needed the rest because I'd been so busy doing other things. It was kind of nice not to have to worry and prepare about the show.
True, yeah. I mean, work and alone, the day job, you know.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Sydney is not with us, as you can see tonight. She's still recovering from whatever it is that ails her.
Yep.
And we have talked to her, and she is recovering, and she does plan on being at the December show, which we still have to talk about. We're not quite sure what we're going to do for December
It's true,
yet.
yeah. We have to figure out what we're going to do. But
Yeah, maybe we'll do a favorites, or maybe we'll have some guests. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to let you know a few things that went on during the last 2 months while we were gone. We both were at a huge book signing in Haverhill, Mass.
Yep, Haverhill. That's right. You said it correctly.
Not Haverhill, Haverhill.
Yep.
And it was the River City Writers, which is Chris Golden and
James Moore.
James Moore.
Yep.
And I forget what, Oktoberfest, I believe is what it was called.
The Merrimack Valley.
Yes,
yeah,
Bookfest.
Bookfest,
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. And it's basically all genre writers.
Yeah, there was a ton of us there. I think there's about 50 authors.
Absolutely. It was in the Haverhill Library.
Yep.
Public library.
And it was a huge success.
It sure was.
A lot of people went. This is the second year Jim and Chris have held the fair.
Well, actually, it's the third because they did it one time
ACT.
at the...
You're right.
Yeah,
At the ACT Theater, you're
that's
right.
right,
Yep. And there was a lot of fun. And boy, everybody's looking forward to next year.
Yeah.
It was good. Joe Hill was at this one.
He sure was.
Yeah.
He was sitting right behind me, and I didn't even know he was there.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah. It was kind of odd. So, David Brom, who sat next to me
Yep.
as the author, he came back from lunch, and he goes, "Oh, did you say hi to Joe?" I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "He's right there." And I turn around, and it was him. And the whole time, I heard him talking for like a half hour, 40
Didn't
minutes.
recognize it.
I
Yeah.
didn't know it was him that was behind me. Yeah, it was kind of embarrassing.
Well, it's kind of amusing because I guess there was a panel or he had a reading.
Yes, he did.
And then afterwards, they had a book signing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody left the panels to go to the book signing.
Right.
So who was ever at the panels, was like, where'd everybody go?
Yeah,
it was all by themselves.
And downstairs it cleared out too, where because I didn't go to the panels, I had to watch my table, and literally everybody just disappeared,
Yeah.
even at the tables
Yeah.
when he had his signing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
But for folks who don't know who Joe Hill is, his real name's Joe King, Joe Hill King, which is Stephen's
Stephen's son,
older
yes.
son, his older
Yeah.
son.
Yeah, I'm sure most people do know Joe from his novels, which The Fireman was the last one,
Right.
which was a huge seller, and he's just come out with a new one called Strange Weather.
Yeah, that was the one
four
he was signing.
novellas. That's the one he was signing.
Yeah, 4 novellas. Yeah.
But the other thing that happened that was, I think, kind of neat at the Merrimack Valley Book Fest was the release of a couple novels, exclusive to the show, and they're available now. But Waiting by Rick Hoddela.
Yes.
Yeah, that was, I guess, his last book to be released. Rick died a few years ago.
Well, was that a reprint?
No. Well, it's not a reprint in trade or ebook. It was Cemetery Dance did a limited
Okay, it was limited
edition. Yeah. And even then, I'm not too sure if that ever happened, but it was with Cemetery Dance for a while.
Gotcha.
In addition to that, Jim Moore released One Bad Week, which is a collection of stories concerning two of his characters, primarily Jonathan Crowley and Rufo the Clown. So Rufo's a scary little guy. If you look at that cover, you'll shiver.
I actually bought or got his YA novel. I picked up there I haven't checked. I haven't read it yet though, but it seemed very interesting because it was more of a techno thriller type. And
Remember the name of it?
Yeah, unfortunately I don't.
You don't?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Well, I know he came out with a YA series. He had there's 7 books, I think, in the series.
Oh, interesting.
But this doesn't sound like.
Yeah, no, this I think was a standalone. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Have to look into that. And he also released Jim Moore's Dinner for One, which is a book of short nonfiction chapters
Yes.
detailing his life after his wife died.
Right. Yep.
It's I've read them as he published them on his blog over the years, and it's really some excellent reading. So, other than the River City Merrimack Valley Book Fest, I was at Annie's bookstop in Worcester, Mass. this past weekend, where all the Haverhill, I did it again, where all the Haverhill House authors were reading. We had quite a group of people there. The authors that attended were Jim Moore, Bracken McLeod, Matt Bechtel, myself, and the publisher of Haverhill House, John McElveen, and that was a lot of fun. And since we're talking about Haverhill House and John, he did announce on Facebook, I'm going to say a week or two ago, that he is publishing my new novel, The Moore House. So I'm very excited about that. That's going to come out, it should be out before March. They're trying to have it out in time for StokerCon, which is a big horror convention in Rhode Island the first week of March. So hopefully I'll have some good news for you guys and be able to show you the cover, and the book will be available first week of March. Other than that, I think that's it.
Well, I actually did the New England Horror Writers Salem.
Oh, that's
sales.
right, yeah.
So,
Halloween, yeah.
Yeah, basically Salem, Massachusetts has a big Halloween festival every year. Huge blocks, they block off the streets and whatnot. And Scott Godsword of the New England Horror Writers set up a table there, a huge table. We had 3 big tables, and a bunch of us authors were there selling our wares and meeting horror fans and trick-or-treaters that were out and about. And,
Talk about a built-in audience. Huh?
Yeah. So I think the biggest name that we had that showed up was Tom Deedy was there.
Oh, Tom, yeah.
Bram Stoker winner, as a matter of fact. Yep.
Yeah.
So it was a fun time. The first day was fantastic because of the great weather, but the second day was a washout because of rain.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
People lost power in our town, and where I live in Amherst, New Hampshire, where the winds were so bad it knocked out thousands of people for a couple of days.
Well, we lost it for a couple hours. We were lucky.
Okay. Yeah. So it was that day. That was that day. The second day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Speaking of Tom, he's just released a new novella, Weekend Getaway, which is excellent.
Yeah, that's the break-in, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I picked that.
Home
I bought that
Invasion.
from him
Yeah.
at Salem, as a matter of fact. I'm going to read that.
Yeah. Tom was at Annie's also, and he was also at the. He was my table mate at the Book Fest.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Haverhill, yeah.
Did he read at the Annie's?
No, he didn't. He's not a Haverhill House author.
He just came
for support.
So,
Yeah.
see some friends.
Yep.
Yeah,
Great guy. Really like.
Tom's a
quite
great
bit.
guy. Fantastic. The only reason I actually met him was because of this show.
The show.
Yeah, because before that I wasn't even aligned with him on
Facebook.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's it. You got anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much all I got. Yeah.
Well, we've got 2 really good guests tonight.
We do.
Yeah, Peter Dudar and L.L. Soares. And why don't you just get to them, right? Let's do it now.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll be right back. We've got our first guest for this evening, and I'm really pleased to introduce you guys to Peter Dudar.
That's right. Pete,
Thank you
good
for
to
having me.
I'm
I'm finally happy to be here in person. This is great.
And I get to finally meet you in person.
Yeah,
after
this is wonderful.
And I've talked to you on
we
other
did a podcast a while
together.
back.
Well, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, the first time we met, you've been on the show before, but it was a remote
Right, it was
show.
up in my garage, and that was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, but I'll tell you a real quick story. I bought lights for that show because it was in your garage.
Yeah.
And it was dark, and you said, hey, we're going to need some lights. So I
Yeah.
went out and bought some lights, and we used it for the show. When the show was over, I went to touch the lights.
Oh,
They
no.
were so hot, I was worried that they would burn.
There were
the
some camera
garage down.
difficulties, too. I know we had trouble setting up the cameras for that
Oh,
shoot.
that was a nightmare. Yeah.
But it wasn't terrible. And once we got rolling, everything was fine.
Everything was great. It was one of the more fun remote shoots that I've done.
I think that may have been your first remote shoot, wasn't it?
Oh, it probably was.
Yeah, I
Possibly.
think it was.
Could have been.
It was
yeah.
exciting.
It was either that or John McElveen's house.
Yeah,
one of the two.
I think I was thinking that too, but I was thinking maybe you did this first.
Oh, it might have been. Yeah. But it was fun. Yeah, it
was.
was a good time. You've got a bio to read.
I do. Yes, we got Pete's bio right here, and let me go ahead and read it. So here we are. Peter N. Dudar has been writing and publishing horror fiction for over a decade now. Born and raised in Albany, New York, Peter is an alum of Christian Brothers Academy and received his Bachelor's of Arts degree in English at the State University of New York at Albany. He currently resides in Lisbon Falls, Maine, and is a proud member of the New England Horror Writers.
As we are.
And you know
Yes,
what?
absolutely.
I'm shocked. I always thought you were born and raised in Maine, but you
No,
weren't.
Albany, New York.
How about that?
They're talking a lifetime ago now.
Yeah, so,
I try not to think about those days.
yeah.
Well, since we're talking about Maine, let's start off
Sure.
with the obvious. Do you think, as a Maine writer, that you have influenced Stephen King or Rick Hoddle in any way?
No, but I'll tell you, Rick is a sweetheart. He championed my first novel when it came out, and for that, I'll always be grateful for that.
Did he really?
Especially Time for the Stokers. He was posting on Facebook that this was the book that he thought deserved to win, and that was truly a heartening thing for me.
Wow, that's
So,
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
So-
that is
so-
fantastic.
yeah. Did you spend a lot of time with Rick?
Yeah, actually, quite a bit. I was talking with Lauren on the ride over about 20 years ago, back when the HWA had their first regional shootouts. We used to meet in Concord, New Hampshire, at an Irish bar in one of the hotels. And that was the first time I met Rick Hoddle. And when I found out he was coming, I brought like 4 or 5 paperbacks. I had like Impulse and Nightstone. And I think Mountain King was the book that had just come out. And I brought that copy with me. And literally at the middle of the table, I said, "Would you please sign these?" And I pushed them at him. And he was very gracious about it and handled it very well. But after that fact, I realized I was a gushing fanboy at that moment. And that was not cool. So.
Well, we all have those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he signed it with a little telltale skull that he always signs
oh,
his
yeah.
books with.
Yeah, I've got a
And
bunch of those.
You know, certainly have a high place in my library.
Has Rick or Stephen King influenced your writing?
Absolutely, both of them have. I mean, Rick is a wonderful author of ghost stories. You know, Beyond the Shroud, and there's so many of them. But absolutely, Stephen King as well. When I first moved to Maine, I started writing because I thought, well, I'm in King country, and I had read most of his books by then anyway. So I decided to give it a chance. So
And look where you are now.
exactly, I'm doing all right.
Jeez.
So long ago, actually, as we stated, interviewed you about your debut novel, Requiem for a Dead Flies. And,
Yes.
let's talk about that. First of all, it was nominated for Stoker, which was
Right,
fantastic.
for
And that's the
debut
one-
novel, yeah.
for debut novel. But why don't you let us know a little bit about it, because that's the one that actually put you on the map and was the one that Rick
You know,
actually liked.
it's funny. I think that book was more successful than I had planned it to be. I thought it wasn't going to go very far at all. And I just happened to have a lot of people, championing. No one ever does this gig alone. There's always people who help you along the way. And Rick Hoddle, like I said, was one of them. And Joe McKinney was another.
Joe
He
McKinney,
blurbed the book for me, which was huge. But that book started out on a series of nightmares I had when my grandmother was dying. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I had dreamed that she had a collection of dead flies on her dining room table, and she was talking to them and arranging them to answer her when she asked questions.
This is your dream?
This is in my dream. And I walked in on, and she caught me spying on her, and she started putting it in her mouth and swallowing them. And I woke up, and I literally walked downstairs to my computer, and I started writing that night.
Holy cow.
That was, again, it feels like a lifetime ago now. It's only been 5 years.
Well, I read that book, and
Yeah, a long time
it's
ago.
not only creepy, it's written very well. You
thank
did a
you.
really good job
Thank
on
you.
that.
You know, it's funny. I had to write 3 failed novels to actually finally write something successful. So I guess I'm doing all right with it.
I think you're doing
So-
fine. Let's talk about your other novels.
Okay.
Requiem was a pretty in-depth, thoughtful novel, almost existentially dark. It was quiet, chilling.
Well, thank you. I like psychological horror like that. I like slow build, deep burns, psychological, especially ghost stories, because that book had an unreliable narrator, which I love. I think that's terrific. But I like redemption stories, and all through when I was writing it, I was worried: is this guy gonna, redeem himself by the end? Is it gonna end well? Is it gonna end terribly? And after a while, I stopped working from the outline I had written for it and just let the story tell itself.
Good.
And I think it was a lot more successful that way.
I agree. We won't get into that now. Maybe we'll talk about it tonight at
Okay.
dinner. But yeah, I think you did the right thing.
Well, thank you.
But you write Requiem for Dead Flies, then comes Blood Cult of the Booby Farmers.
Yes, I can't even say that title. I have a love-hate relationship with that book at this point. I think every author aspires to write something that they're going to be remembered for. And at the rate I'm going right now, that might be the book I'm remembered for, and I'm really upset about that. Invariably, when I sit at a dealer's room and I'm at the table and I've got that book and all my other stuff out, invariably people walk up and they pick up Blood Cult of the Booby Farmers, and it's like they can't believe what they're holding in their hands. They think it's a joke,
Well, it's kind of a joke. I mean,
it started as a joke.
yeah. Well,
It started as a practical joke on my publishers at Nightscape Press. Once Requiem had been accepted, I write erotica under a pseudonym. And I thought, how funny would it be to send them a second query from my erotica name and see if they would be interested in purchasing the book. So I started this online dialogue with one of the editors, Mark Sino. And I said, hi, I'm a friend of Pete Dudar. I understand you're looking for new books and everything. I write erotica, but would you be interested if I sent you something? And after a couple emails, he wrote back, well, it has to be really good. He goes, well, we're willing to look at it if it's good. What do you have in mind? And I wrote back, well, I've got this book called Blood Cult of the Booby Farmers. And literally, I was laughing so hard when I wrote that because it was the first thing that came to my mind. And it took a day or two, and I finally got a note back from Mark saying, is this you? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. So, but I had told the story to Nick Cato of Novella Publishers, and he said, if you wrote that book, I'd be interested in reading it. And so I literally sat down and started writing it. Fastest acceptance I've ever gotten. I literally sent the manuscript, and overnight I got the acceptance back.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So,
Yeah. It's not a bad book. You're making it sound like it's just way out of...
the subject matter is difficult. It's very painfully difficult, especially in the society we're living in right now.
Well.
And that's unfortunate. Yeah. But I wrote a very straight story disguised as a dark comedy. I mean, I put a lot of thought and effort into this. I really told a story that's really literary and well thought out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it's accepted as well as it is. Yeah. So I haven't got any bad reviews on it, literally have not, especially from women. The women who've read it have really thought it was a terrific story. So,
well, it's almost an homage to those old B movies. Anyways,
oh, absolutely.
You know, Grindhouse movies.
I grew up when HBO first came out, and at night they always had these, creature feature shows that you never get to see on TV. Right. And the one that I remember that stands out is Humanoids from the Deep.
Yeah,
which it's not directed by him. It was produced by him.
It, yeah.
And the basic premise of that movie is that these monsters under the sea come on land and they rape women and they impregnate them so they can have babies. And it's an awful thing, but if you look at the different ways you can look at it based on what you know of the world, it could be a metaphor for male toxicity, these terrible men who can't control their behavior. And if you're a racist, it might mean, black men having sex with white women and how terrible that could be, which is a terrible thing. Don't ever think that's okay. Don't be a racist. But there's different ways you can interpret it. And my interpretation is, hey, this is a monster movie with naked women. And that's all I really need to see. So.
You got a question?
Speaking of fun novellas, and also with bugs in the title, Where Spiders Fear to Spin.
Yes.
Why don't you give us a little bit about that one and talk about that one?
That was a fundraiser I did for my daughter's PTO for the Lisbon Community School. I was approached by the committee asking if I could donate something to their fundraiser. And I said I could write a character into my story. People could bid on it, and if the lucky winner would be put into the story. And the winner was a 10-year-old girl, which I hadn't anticipated whatsoever. I thought it would be some adult, hey, this is going to be great. Someone had won this for his daughter. And so I had to write a daughter into the story, the 10-year-old girl. But I ended up being so pleased with it that I decided I would give all of my proceeds from my own back to the LCS PTO as well. So
good for you.
It's done a very good job so far. I'm really pleased with it.
And is that through Booze and Books?
No, Books and Booze.
Books and Booze, I'm sorry, I had it backwards.
Stacey Harris.
Yes, Stacey, yeah. Yeah, she published my novella Steel.
Yeah, she's terrific. And she's also a wonderful editor. If you ever need editing service, I highly recommend her.
She's my editor.
Oh, there you go. So you know.
Yes, I do.
Preaching to the choir.
I love Stacey. She's just great.
And she's a phenomenal writer as well.
She is. Oh, so, I love her stuff.
Yeah.
We're running out of time here, so I'm going to give you one more question. Your short stories, you don't seem to have a particular style in your short stories. The narrative plots are as different as your novels have been. Mm-hmm. What's your approach to short stories? How do you look at them?
I develop short stories basically from dreams or from when I'm working. I have a random thought that stretches into a story. I don't sit down with any pattern or any equation of how it's going to come out. It's just you have a thought process and the what if comes out. What if this happens? What if that happens? How can you turn something upside down, on its head?
Are you telling me Clown Smile came from a...
That came from a very naughty discussion I had at work, which I'm not sure you want to mention
on
this show.
We won't. No, we won't. It's PG rated.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, stuff like that. We had a very disgusting topic of conversation at work, some coworkers of mine, and a lot of them were female, and they were the ones who brought it up. And again, I had that what if this happened, and I wrote a story about it. And again, everyone had a great big laugh at work. They all thought it was terrific. So.
Well, it's in Dolly and Other Stories.
Yep.
It's a great collection of stories
and
a lot of fun. Yeah. Going to read for us?
Absolutely. I'm going to be reading from an anthology that came out this summer called The Forsaken from Cemetery Dance. It's one of their ebooks. It's unfortunately not in paperback. But my story is called The Pressboard Factory. A few years before all of this happened, I asked my dad about the pressboard factory. We were out fishing the Androscoggin River across the factory's riverside facade. The heat of the afternoon and the lack of nibbles was sending my mind into boredom, and I found myself staring at the rear side of the Fibertech plant. The building itself rested upon a stone wall that dropped directly down into the riverside. One corner had succumbed to the elements, leaving a brick-and-mortar portal directly into the darkened confines of the building's workroom floor. The derelict building had been abandoned for at least a dozen years. In my earliest recollection, I can remember standing outside on Main Street, waiting for the school bus, and smelling that awful glue smell that permeated the air. It was sour and oppressive, and if I breathed it in through my nose too long, I would eventually find myself dry heaving against the stop sign on the corner of Main and Goddard. And then one day, as if by magic, the scent disappeared. I can't remember the exact time and place I was when I noticed it, but it seemed like all of a sudden I smelled Mrs. Daly's lilac bushes and the rows of tulips planted outside Crossman's funeral home. It was as if the town had suddenly come back to life. Nobody knows what happened, my dad told me, hauling his line back in to ascertain the bait was still on the hook. There were 8 men who worked in the factory. Stanley Ripken owned the plant, and he had 7 other guys working for him, all of them right here from town. And then one day in July, not a one of them came home after the whistle blew quitting time. My father leaned forward and whispered in a voice that was both conspiratorial and admonishing. It was as if they all disappeared without a trace. That's impossible, I replied, my mind reeling in fascination. This was urban legend that was literally less than a mile away from my house. I could have walked down Main Street, turned left on Route 196, and climbed over the cyclone fence into the Fibertech factory's outdoor paddock, where the wood pulp was dumped by local lumber companies, and then scooped up by a big yellow Caterpillar bulldozer and dropped into the hopper that led to the underground factory. Beyond the paddock was a storage yard where dozens of pallets of particle board lay abandoned in an enormous maze and left to rot in the elements. Most of the pressboard had turned into big piles of mush, and on hot summer days you could still smell the glue that held most of the wood pulp together. People don't just disappear. Something had to happen to them. What did the police find when they went to investigate? My father shook his head slowly, the look in his eyes confirming that all of this was true. They found blood, lots of it. So much blood that the crows from the woods broke through the glass windows trying to get inside and scavenge for food. But no bodies were ever recovered. No skeletons or corpses or anything to remotely identify the crew of the Fibertech factory. But here's the thing. My father's eyes went wide as he stared into mine. There was something wrong with the glue. It did something to all the people here in town. Old man Ripken went cheap and started buying the epoxy from China, and when it got heated, it released some kind of toxins into the air. Sniffing it here outside the plant was enough to cause hallucinations. All those mornings you were out waiting for the school bus, you used to tell your mom that the clouds in the sky turned into dragons and that they frightened you when they breathed fire. I looked deep into my dad's eyes to see if he was teasing me, but the gaze that met me was one of absolute seriousness. You weren't the only one. People in town reported crazy things to the Lisbon Police Department. In fact, the Lisbon Falls Ledger dropped their crime beat column for nearly 6 months because of the insane reports that came in. It was scary, believe me. And then one day came when the Fibertech crew vanished without a trace. The police searched the Androscoggin River for months looking for bodies, sent divers in to search all the way down to the dam in Brunswick. They never found anything. Son, I'm going to tell you something right now. I don't ever want to hear that you set foot on that property, not even on a dare. Bad things happened in that plant. I believe that 8 grown men died in there, so don't you dare cross that fence. Do you understand me?
Great beginning. Excellent beginning.
Well, thank you very much.
And what's that in now?
The Forsaken, Stories of Abandoned
Cemetery
Places.
dance, right?
Yep, cemetery dance.
Nice.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Well,
Nice
thank you.
sale, too. Yeah. Good for you.
thanks.
Thank
Can
you.
I do a quick plug for the New England
Absolutely,
Horror Raiders? We're
yes.
also have Wicked Haunted, which is our new collection of ghost stories, and is available now on Kindle and trade paperback on Amazon.
All right,
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you came in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
All right, we'll be back with our next guest, L.L. Soares, in a minute. Hey, we're here with our second guest.
Hey.
L.L. Soares. Can we call you Lauren, or should we say L.L.?
Yeah, well, my first name's Lauren. I go by L.L. When you're a guy and you grow up with the name Lauren, you kind of would appreciate probably using initials.
What was your middle name, man?
Lawrence.
Lauren Lawrence.
It's almost like, yeah, it's almost like Humbert. You know?
Did you go by Larry?
No, my father's name was Larry, so I went by Logan as a nickname as a kid,
There you go.
just to have a different nickname. But yeah, love-hate relationship with my name, so
Yeah.
the initials are fine.
We're going to get into this so we can ask you as many questions as we can
Definitely.
here. I'm going to read his bio. L.L. Soares is a Bram Stoker Award-winning writer working mostly in the horror field. He is a film critic as well as the editor and publisher at cinemaknifefight.com, Nick Cato's group, right?
No, well, that's my group.
That's
But
your group, but Nick,
Nick writes for us as well. Yeah.
gotcha, okay.
Pete does. Peter Dudar does. Too.
I know Peter did
Yeah.
too, yep. That's a movie review site that focuses mainly on genre films. He has dozens of stories in magazines and anthologies. His first story collection with Laura Cooney, his wife, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Sickness.
Yeah. I wrote another one with my mistress, but I don't talk about that normally.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah, Laura might get a little upset.
Yeah.
Was released by Skullvines Press in October 2010 and features solo stories by Soares and Cooney, as well as a title novella which they wrote together. His first novel, Life Rage, was released in September 2012 from Nightscape Press and won the Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in First Novel. Congratulations.
Where it was nominated on the same category with Pete Dudar's Requiem for Dead Flies.
And you beat him. And you're
I
best
actually
friends.
thought I
You're
actually were best friends,
Yep.
and I really thought he was going to win because everybody throughout the dinner went up to him and said, "Oh, well, you're going to win, Pete. You're going to win, Pete." And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to win, and then I won. So it was kind of weird.
His other novels include Rock and Roll, which I haven't read, but everybody tells me that's the book of yours to read.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
From Gallows Press, and Hard from Novello Blue. Is that Nick Cato's group? Novello?
Yes,
I thought
that's
so.
it. Yeah,
okay.
he published that one.
His
That's
most,
more like a noir kind of thing. It's not horror, really.
okay. His most recent novel is Buried in Blue Clay, which came out earlier this year. To learn more about Lauren, go to
LLSource.com.
llsource.com.
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically you've obviously written for a while. 2012 was when you won the award, and
Yeah.
and 2010 you had written the book with your wife. So you have a lot of stuff, but we're here tonight to talk about your new book. So
Definitely,
why
yeah.
don't you talk about what Buried in the Blue Clay is all about?
Well, it's buried in blue clay,
I
not
said,
the blue clay.
I screwed that up.
No,
right?
but seriously, it's just about a guy who goes back to his hometown after about 20 years, and he's a writer, but he's kind of a failed writer, and he just kind of gets a job to do a book about the mythology of the town. So he goes back, and he kind of has a love-hate relationship with the place. He really doesn't want to go there, and he meets a lot of like odd characters, and basically finds some very strange supernatural kind of things going on in the town that most people don't know about.
Now, well, if I could interject for a second, was this based off of Ben Mears of Salem's Lot? Because it sounds similar, where he goes back to write about mythology of the town.
No, I don't even think I've read Salem's. I mean, I've seen the movie,
Yeah.
but no, it definitely
It's nothing
is not,
like it.
Nothing like it. Yeah,
Nothing like it.
yeah.
For me, I have read the book, and again, I've told you how much I enjoyed it.
I appreciate it.
Oh, I really did like it. It's got a hippie vibe to it, and there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of hallucinatory experiences.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And quite a bit of casual sex, not so
Oh.
casual at sometimes.
Yeah.
Was this a culture you set out to capture when you started writing, or did it just come to you and you decided to delve into it? Is it biographical?
Well, no. All right. I'm not a hippie, so yeah, it wasn't.
Oh, you might have been.
Well, I might have been at one. I was actually more into punk when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I was more of a punk than a hippie. But I think a lot of that came from the fact that the house is based on a house that was similar in the 60s by a group called Love.
Yeah.
That was a band.
Yeah.
And they had a house that was kind of like a communal house where everybody hung out and everybody lived. And it was kind of like a hippie place, and they took drugs and had orgies and that kind of stuff. And it's kind of homage to that.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't around during that time. How old are you?
I don't really want to say how old I was, but I was a kid at that time.
You were a kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I love the band Love, and I love that whole mythology, and I definitely wanted to do something similar.
Ah, okay. Well, it worked.
Yeah, good.
The Lovecraft influences in Buried in Blue Clay are very obvious, with its focus on sea creatures. But from doing some research, I found out that Charles Bukowski is also an influence. Explain that.
Well, first of all, I didn't write the book really as a homage or a connection or in any way to Lovecraft. It just kind of came out that way. I had actually written a few short stories first about Blue Clay, about the characters and about the entities that lived there. And I kind of wrote the novel as just a way to explore it further and just open the whole thing up. When I first wrote the book, I actually wrote it from the point of view of wanting to write, what if Charles Bukowski wrote a horror novel? And I don't know if you're familiar with Charles Bukowski, but
Who is Charles Bukowski?
Charles
I have no
Bukowski is a
idea who he
writer
is.
who they based the movie Barfly on him. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
no.
He basically was a guy who drank a lot and had a pretty rough and tumble life, and he wrote a lot of very gritty kind of fiction, and with definitely a sense of humor to it too. And he definitely had his own style of writing and his own voice. And I was kind of trying to figure out what would I do if I was a Charles Bukowski character in a horror situation.
It worked.
Well, actually, it started out that way, but then it kind of went totally into a different direction where the character was more patterned after myself and it became more personal.
Ah.
And it's also semi-based on a city named New Bedford in Massachusetts, where I grew up,
Portuguese city.
which is a
Yep.
former mill city, had a lot of industry at one time and kind of fell in hard times.
Yep.
And that's also kind of, an influence on the book as well.
To follow up on that, the lead character, Reddy, he obviously has a lot of problems.
Yeah, little bit, yeah.
Negative person,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole bit. But he's also a writer, and you were mentioning here how stuff is based off of the city of New Bedford, kind of, and yourself. How much of this Reddy guy is you then?
Well, I think a lot of him is me, but not the obvious stuff.
Okay.
Like I'm not a complete alcoholic, and I'm not. I'm not having
partial.
orgies in a house somewhere, and I don't know, like different things like that aren't true. But a lot of the little details are very personal. And Reddy, as far as the name goes, in Charles Bukowski's work, he has a character named Henry Chininsky. His first name was Henry, and it was a kind of a character that was it was kind of like a stand-in for him. And Soames is obvious, but Reddy is a nickname for Redmond, and that was that's my father-in-law's first middle name.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Ireland, and I always thought it was kind of a cool name.
So there's a cult leader, H.E.K., in the book, and as we've seen in real life, a lot of cult leaders turn out to be very bad people.
Yeah.
But in this case, he's not necessarily the over-the-top evil as we think, and may actually be sympathetic. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
He's based on somebody.
Yeah, well, I guess he could have been based on someone like Manson or somebody, but I guess another way, maybe he's more based on someone like Aleister Crowley or someone like that, who was more an occult figure who definitely drew people to him. But I don't think he really has this intention of wanting to do horrible things and murder people or anything. He just kind of wants to have this, be kind of like the nucleus and everybody kind of float around him. But he also knows a lot of things about the city of Blue Clay that nobody knows. And he kind of has he has his fingers in a lot of pies. And I think that that's also interesting about him, is that he just has, he has tentacles everywhere in the city. But he's not necessarily a negative character.
Yeah, surprising.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with other of your works that I've read, and I would consider them on the extreme side.
Okay.
What is it about visceral and extreme fiction that appeals to you? Why do you like it so much?
Okay, I don't think necessarily that I am extreme. There are a lot of people like Ed Lee and Ralph
that's
James
very-
White
yes.
who are very extreme.
Yep.
And I definitely think that my stuff is more commercial and more
Mainstream.
accessible maybe for people who don't really want the real extreme stuff, although I very much enjoy that. I think that what it is a lot of my favorite writers growing up were people like Henry Miller, Charles Bukowski, William S. Burroughs, people like that who were very avant-garde, very, very explicit about things. They weren't afraid to say details about sexuality or violence. And I think that sensibility is definitely part of what I do as a writer. So I don't even really think about it. I don't say, oh, I want to write something to shock somebody or something explicit. I think a lot of it is just the way I write. My writing just happens to go a lot of times into an area where I talk about sex or violence in a
Didn't you
detailed
write
manner.
a novella with Dan Cohane?
Yes, I did.
That was pretty violent
That's-
too, as I remember.
The one about the clown?
Yeah, the clown.
Yeah. It was called Nightmare and Grease Paint.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm writing right now something that's kind of a spin-off of that.
Oh, really? By yourself?
Yeah, there's an amulet in the story that allows the guy to go into a different place where he disposes of bodies, and that place is going to be in the new book I'm going to be working on. So it is going to be kind of a spin-off. But yeah, that came out pretty good.
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed that too. Like I said, I think the only thing I haven't read by you is rock and roll, so I gotta get into that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Hey, you got something to read for us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a little bit from Buried in Blue Clay, just to give you a little taste of it. And I better take out my glasses because I'm kind of old.
Kinda.
Yeah, a little bit. And what it is the main character, Reddy Soames, is interviewing an old woman named Edna, and this is the first time he meets her, and it's basically that's take it from there. It took about 20 minutes to get to her place. It was one of the older homes on the west side of the city, probably built in the early 1800s. I pulled up in front, and she was sitting on a porch swing, rocking back and forth as I approached. The sky was overcast. They predicted rain, and it seemed like it was coming in right on cue. Are you Mrs. Soames? She asked. Yes, ma'am, I said. Sorry for the inconvenience. It's not the end of the world, she said. It's just a matter of etiquette, is all. I quite understand. I sat down on the deck chair across from her. I made some fresh lemonade, she said, gesturing to a pitcher on a small table between us. There were 2 glasses beside it. Could you pour me some? Certainly. She thanked me as I handed her a full glass and then poured one for myself. So you're writing a book, she said. Yes. And you grew up here in Blue Clay. I did, but I haven't been here in a very long time. About 20 years. I guess it hasn't changed too much. I've lived here my whole life, she told me, and I just turned 72 last month. And I can tell you I've seen everything change. You just have to know what to look for. But it's a much different place from when I was a girl. I nodded and took a drink from the glass. The lemonade was very sour. There was hardly any sugar in it. But it didn't bother me that much. When I was a kid, I used to eat a whole lemon sometimes. Hadn't done that in a very long time. I looked at the huge willow tree in the front yard that hung over the front of the house. Some of its branches were touching the roof. It was a regal old tree. I put the recorder down on the spot where her glass had been and turned it on. Sitting on the porch chair looking at the big willow tree, my eyes played tricks on me. I almost thought I saw a face looking out from the shadows, someone adorned in tree branches, which just accented the eeriness of the pre-storm day. Knowing it was just an optical illusion of some kind, I ignored it and looked back at Mrs. Caldwell, who was watching me intently. What do you see? She asked. Nothing. I was just wondering when the rain will start. Are you sure? She asked. You seem like someone's peeking out from behind the willow tree. Her tone confused me. I couldn't tell if she wanted me to say yes, that there was someone peeking, and confirm something she herself had seen, or if she wanted me to say no and put her mind at ease. I was tired and didn't care enough to choose the right answer. No, I said, nothing at all. This seemed to make her more tense, and she rocked back and forth on the porch swing, contemplating her glass of lemonade, which she held on her lap. You were going to tell me about the jellies, I said. Oh, you mean the bottle people. When I was a girl, you see, sightings of these creatures were actually quite common, especially among children. It was like the jellies, as you call them, were certain that no one would believe us, and sure enough, no adults did. But we knew what we had seen. Can you tell me about a specific incident? I asked, sounding as curious as I was. Well, I was playing on the beach one day. The blue one, she said. Most of these stories take place around there. Yes, it seems to be the nucleus of all this activity, I said. I was a girl playing in the clay near the water line, and I remember the water tickling my feet. I was wearing the most adorable little one-piece bright yellow suit, like a little canary. I loved that bathing suit. I was amazed she could remember all of that. Okay. And I was digging in the clay with my little shovel, and it's more like sand than water, and I touched something that wriggled but got away. And I'll just leave it there.
That's good. That's great. I know what happened, so
Yeah.
I'm smiling and laughing, and I enjoyed the book. You did a good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great
Yeah.
interview.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nice
Think
meeting you guys.
You come back sometime?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a
Sounds
fun
good.
time. Yeah. And we're gonna get some tacos.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to tell you, I think the name The Taco Society is probably the scariest thing I've ever heard in my life. What a great name for a horror show. It really tells just what it is.
Well,
Thank you.
Tony came up that.
Yes,
Yeah, I figured that.
that was done deliberately.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we'll be back in a minute to close up the show. Thank you. That's another good show.
It was.
Yeah. Peter's, as we mentioned during the show, has been on before, and I've known Peter for a number of years, and he's a really fun guy to talk to and to hang with. And excellent writer. I really enjoyed everything I've read by Peter. And Lauren, another great guy. I don't know him as long as I've known Peter, but from what time I've spent with him, I've always enjoyed his company.
Yeah, this is my first time actually meeting both in person.
Oh,
Though I've
okay.
been friends with them numerous times. I mean, for years on Facebook.
Facebook,
and I've
yeah.
actually interviewed Pete, as I said earlier in the interview. But yeah, it was great to meet them in person. Shows there's a lot of diversity in New England because a Boston writer and a
Maine.
writer.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for watching tonight's show, and we will be back in December for our December show, our Christmas show. So thank you very much.